Bună ziua tuturor! Îmi pare foarte bine că sunteți astăzi aici, alături de noi. Pentru început aș dori să mă prezint. Mă numesc Victoria Pleșca, sunt șefa secției Relații Internaționale și Integrare Europeană din cadrul Agenției de Stat pentru Proprietate Intelectuală și vă spun încă o dată un bun venit la evenimentul nostru de astăzi, conferința de lansare a proiectului Uniunii Europene, consolidarea drepturilor de proprietate intelectuală în Georgia, Moldova și Ucraina. Mai multe detalii despre
more details about the project, the goals of the project, the expected outcomes, as well as potential beneficiaries will be shared a bit later by the project leader. I would just like to mention that this is a project funded by the European Union and implemented by the European Union Office for Intellectual Property. And I would like to greet the EU4IP representatives, represented by the Executive Director, and the representatives of the European Commission who are in Chișinău today, represented by the Project Manager, Program Manager, Jan Robles. Welcome. And I would also like to greet the IP offices within the EU member states that will be providing support throughout this project. And I would also like to greet the representatives of Georgia and Ukraine who are with us today in Chișinău. The project has started on the 1st of January 2024 and is officially inaugurated today in Chișinău. Having said these, I would not like to steal very precious time that you have, and I would like to offer the floor for a welcome word to Rodica Crudu, State Secretary for European Integration, key point of the mechanism for coordinating EU accession mechanism and the member of EU accession negotiations team. Rodica, you have the floor. You can hear me, right? Your Excellency, Ambassador Mr. Majex, dear Director General Mitrao, Director General Russo, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to be here with you at this important event, which happens at around 2 weeks after this explanatory screening that we had in Brussels, next to our colleagues from Brussels, from DG NEAR, focusing on Chapter 7 of the European Acquis that was attended by our colleagues from the AJP, from the colleagues from the European Integration Bureau, as well as other colleagues from other institutions with responsibilities in this area. Otherwise, the Republic of Moldova has significantly progressed, and our national IP system corresponds already to a great extent to international and European standards. And let me mention today only several of the most recent developments that we have shared with our colleagues from the DG Directorate General for Extension or Enlargement from Brussels, such as the approval in 2022 of the law on copyright and related rights, which is there to transpose a series of related directives. At the same time, in 2023, we have approved the law on the protection of commercial secrecy and the amendments to the law on the protection of the inventions. These are a few of the achievements within the alignment and harmonization of the national legislation to the community acquis. However, we still have a lot to work. This is why I'm greeting the implementation of this project, which focuses on strengthening of the legal framework and political framework in the area of IP and the support of the EU accession process, enhancement of the level of awareness of the value of the IP, as well as the capacity of SMEs and the productive sector to protect to manage, to sell, and ensure the respect of the rights in this regard, as well as the intensification of the cooperation with regard to the assurance of the respect of the IP rights in line with the commitments that we have taken as a country in implementing the association agreement and with the priorities of Moldova's accession to the European Union. The regional dimension of the project is very important, not only in the context when the states, the beneficiary states, have assumed for a joint objective to become EU member states, but also as it will allow for a constant exchange of ideas, practices, and methods that will help all of us meet all the standards, European standards in this area. We'll be able to build a favorable environment for enhancing IP sector in the region in parallel with the strengthening of the institutional capacities of the authorities which have mandates in this area, and therefore we shall contribute to the creation of an appropriate or a sustainable economic development conducive climate. I'm confident that the project will help the State Agency for IP to continue with great success the efforts which are already being undertaken or are being started, including as an institution coordinating the working group number 7, which had been set up with regard to this aspect of the acquis communautaire, intellectual property. This is a complex chapter, and the government will dedicate all the necessary resources so that we speed up the progress on our European path. And to conclude, I would like to most sincerely thank the European Commission, the EU Office for Intellectual Property, and the EU delegation to Chișinău for the funding and the support in implementing this area for the development of the IP. And I would like to wish everyone, those engaged in this project, as well as the participants at this meeting and this launch conference, to have productive discussions, and in particular the institutions involved in this process to achieve the goals of the project, to achieve the deliverables that they have aimed at, and so that we enjoy the effects of this project altogether.
Vă mulțumim frumos. Iar acum aș dori să acord un cuvânt de salut domnului ambasador.
I would like now to offer the floor to the EU Ambassador to the Republic of Moldova, Mr. Yanis Majeix. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Dear Ms. Trudeau, dear directors, dear audience, very good afternoon to everyone. I'm pleased to be here with you today to officially launch the project EU4IP, aiming at strengthening intellectual property in Republic of Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine. Let me first thank the EU-IPO for the very good collaboration so far and for choosing Chișinău for this launch event. We are delighted to welcome you here and bringing together the IP community from the EU and the partner countries. This project is the first of its kind in the region. We are glad to finally have a framework where the EU and the member state, together with the Republic of Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia, will work together in strengthening the intellectual property rights and will exchange the best practices. Respect for intellectual property rights is essential for countries that wish to create a favorable economic and legal environment for innovation, investment, creative industries, and free competition. The program will contribute to an effective level of registration, protection, and enforcement of IP rights. This should help strengthen the economic development in Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. Also, it will make the region more attractive for investors. The results of the new project will directly support objectives of the economic investment plan. It will help the three countries integrate more between themselves as well as with the EU internal market. With the granting of EU candidate status, Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine have stepped up their commitments towards EU integration. Alignment with EU policy requires strengthened competitiveness, structural change, and a business-friendly environment that stimulates small and medium-sized enterprises. In that sense, the protection and effective enforcement of intellectual property rights will be essential. Alignment with the EU rules on intellectual property is also a key part of the accession process. IPR is traditionally among the first chapters to be opened in accession talks. Candidate country status obviously is a crucial milestone in the journey towards the membership in the European Union. In the field of intellectual property, Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia have demonstrated commitment and progress thanks to the effective implementation of the association agreements and DCFTA. However, more needs to be done. Getting to the EU will be a whole of society task, and business will also have a task to play. We're glad that this program will support IP agencies and partner countries in order to align more closely with the ambitions of the enlargement and agenda. Once again, I would like to thank EU4IP and its strategic partners for organizing this event, and I wish you success in this event. Thank you very much.
Mulțumesc frumos. Înainte de a-l invita la tribună pe următorul nostru.
Thank you very much. And before offering the floor to our next speaker, I would like to say a few more words. It's João Negrão, the Executive Director of the EU-IPO, with over 15 years of experience within the framework of the European Office for Intellectual Property. Mr. Negrão took over the mandate of an Executive Director last autumn, and in EU-IPO, Mr. Negrão led the extension of the cooperation of this office, offices in the region, creating the European network of IPOs. And therefore, together with the national offices of the member states, the EU Office for Intellectual Property has the most advanced systems and information instruments have been created, which are currently fully available online in over 30 years and free of charge for all the systems, for all the IP systems users. They have also created a convergence system which harmonized practices at the EU level and expanded international cooperation network of EU IPO. The first visit Mr. Negrão paid as an executive director was last autumn to Kiev, Ukraine, and we are very proud to have Mr. Negrão in Chișinău. You have the floor, please.
So much, Madam Secretary of State for European Integration, Mr. Ambassador of the EU to Moldova, Director General of the State Agency for Intellectual Property in Moldova. I would like, first of all, to start by, on behalf of the EU-IPO, to welcome you all to this launch event of this new program on EU4IP that starts now. The first word that I would like to leave and to give, it's a words of appreciation and recognition to the authorities of Moldova for having associated themselves with the EU-IPO and for their willingness to organize this event here in Chișinău. And I have to say that this is the first time that I am in Moldova, the first time that I am in this beautiful city, and I'm extremely well impressed with everything that I have seen so far. So thank you very much for that. My second words, it's a word also of recognition and appreciation to our partners that participate actively in this program. And here I'm referring to the Ukrainian authorities, the IP Office of Ukraine and the IP Office of Georgia, also participants in this regional program, for all the work and interest that they have shown in this program, for the support that they have provided. And I have seen that also in first instance and in first person when I had the chance to meet with the colleagues from the Ukrainian IP Office in Kyiv last October. My third word would be addressed to the partner national offices of member states of the European Union that are here today with us in a very clear signal of support to this program and to contribute and to collaborate with the three countries in helping them also in their path for EU accession in the area of intellectual property. And in that regard, my colleagues from the offices of Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, and Romania, I want also to thank them very, very much for the way they responded immediately to participate and to contribute to this project. And I can tell you that there are more member states also willing to contribute, and we will open, of course, the possibility for all of them to contribute in this regard. And the last word of appreciation that I would like to give is to the European Commission, without whom this program would not be possible. This is, of course, an initiative of the European Commission, of DG NEAR, in support of acceding countries and countries that have also opened negotiations with the EU. And I would like also to convey our thanks and the fact that the Commission again trusts the EU-IPO to be the implementing agency for this matter. As you also know, IP, and as mentioned by the ambassador, IP is not an end in itself. We all know that. But it's an extremely important means to achieve progress, to generate GDP, to generate jobs, to develop our economies, and to make our societies stronger. Without intellectual property rights, there is no incentive for innovation. And without innovation, there is no differentiation, and it's very, very difficult to achieve progress. It's in that context that this program will aim at working with our partner countries in helping them also to become closer to the legal systems of the European Union by, of course, generating possibilities for exchanging best practices and approximation of laws and practices in this regard. I have to say that we are not going to start from zero, because the cooperation that we have established on a bilateral level with the three countries is already significant. There are many, many good examples of cooperation that we have been able to launch, to develop, and to implement with these three countries that we think is going to be a very good basis for the next stage. And of course, we know when looking at the future and at next stages, that it's always important to look at the challenges that we have in front of us. Of course, we have many challenges, starting, of course, with the geopolitical challenge in Europe, but we have also challenges in the area of intellectual property that we need, of course, to tackle. We need to discuss together how we can better tackle these challenges, all of us. The first one that I would like to mention, that I think it's extremely important to attract and to create a business environment in our countries, in our societies, is the need to have a very solid, legal certain IP system. It's only by delivering quality, by delivering rights that have high levels of quality, that can stand in front of a court of law, that you are in fact helping business to continue to innovate, to invest, and then, of course, to recuperate the investments that they have made and continue to invest further. So quality will always be, in my view, the first and number one challenge that we have as IP offices all ahead of us. There is a second challenge that it's very difficult to ignore, which is the challenge of technology. We all know that, of course, technology is impacting our lives and the lives of public and private organizations at all levels. The way we do business, the way we work is changed by technology. We know that artificial intelligence, it's something that we cannot ignore and we should embrace. And we should integrate artificial intelligence and technology in our work. I am totally in favor of technology. I want to say already that I'm totally in favor of artificial intelligence, but not without limits. With limits. We need to ensure that artificial intelligence help us, of course, in doing our work, but the final decision will continue to be taken by a human. That is the human-centric approach that I think we all need to ensure when we are using capabilities such as this one. A third challenge also mentioned by the Madam State Secretary, it's the challenge of ensuring IP rights. enforcement of IP rights. It's extremely important that we have a system in which our law enforcement effectively defends the rights of right holders, of the ones that have invested. It's extremely important that we are able to develop mechanisms to support customs, police, to do a better job. We have very good examples. At the EU-IPO, we have an observatory that we have created at the level of the EU in this area, but there are also other good examples. The observatory created in the State Agency for Intellectual Property in Moldova, even before our own observatory. These are good practices that we need to use, we need to expand to all the partners in this regard and ensure that we have an effective defense of IP rights. We have studies from our observatory that show the negative impact of IP infringement. A very recent study, just for you to know, that was done in 3 sectors only: clothing, cosmetics, and toy industry in the European Union. It shows that the loss of sales in these 3 sectors alone in the European Union because of IP infringement reaches more than 16 billion euros. This is almost the GDP of a EU member state like Malta, for instance. And the number of potential jobs that are not created because of this, it's also relevant. 200,000 potential jobs not created because of IP infringement. These are matters that need to be at the highest level of importance and priority in the European Union, but also in exceeding countries like the 3 partners that we have today here with us. The importance of IP has a very, very high impact in terms of our societies, in terms of our future development. And if we want to be stronger also as countries, particularly in these very, very difficult moments in the world, our economies need to be strong, because if our economies are strong, we can, of course, defend ourselves. We can ensure that our way of life will continue in the next years. I would like to conclude, of course, by thanking and congratulating the 3 countries, the 3 partners that we have here, representatives of the 3 countries, for having received the status of acceding countries to the European Union, and of course Moldova and Ukraine also for the opening of negotiations. We look forward also for the opening of negotiations with Georgia, and from our side as the EU agency that implements programs in the area of IP, I can of course only offer our full support to you, to the 3 countries, and I'm sure that we can count with the full support of the 27 member states, and I look very much forward for the work that we have all in front of us. Thank you very much, and I hope that we have fruitful discussions also during this event. Thank you.
Iar acum aș dori să ofer cuvântul
Now I
domnului
would like to offer the floor to Eugeniu Rusu, General Director of the State Agency for Intellectual Property. Mr. Rusu, you have the floor. Thank you, Victoria. Distinguished State Secretary for European Integration, distinguished Head of the EU Delegation in the Republic of Moldova, distinguished Executive Director of the EU Office for Intellectual Property, distinguished audience. I have great pleasure to greet you at the conference to launch the project Consolidation of Intellectual Property Rights in Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, funded by the EU and implemented by the EU Intellectual Property Office. With your permission, I would like to start with special gratitude to Mr. João Negrão and to the delegation of EU-IPO for their support in organization of this conference in Chișinău. Your contribution is extremely important for the success of the project and for the consolidation of cooperation with the EU. I would also like to express our gratitude for the efforts and constant involvement of the EU in the support of consolidation of intellectual property, both in our country and in the region. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are together to mark the beginning of a new cooperation between the partner states and the EU Our common objective is consolidation and promotion of intellectual property rights. It is a very important initiative in the current global context, where innovation and creativity are the drivers of economic and social progress. Through this project, we want to consolidate the legal and institutional framework in intellectual property. We want to support institutional capacities and raise the awareness among citizens and businesses with regard to the importance and benefits of protecting the intellectual property rights. In Moldova, AGEPI, the intellectual property agency, has a vital role in terms of managing such rights. And under this project, we commit to intensify our efforts in order to create a favorable environment for creativity and sustainable economic growth. Hosting this EU project is very important for the Republic of Moldova because it reaffirms our commitment to consolidate the system of intellectual property and to advance our European integration agenda. We are honored to cooperate with EU4IP and our partners from the EU in order to further consolidate protection of intellectual property in Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine. This cooperation is essential for a favorable environment for creativity, innovation, and fair competition, which will contribute to our European integration objectives, and it will help us better integrate in the European network of intellectual property. Distinguished audience, the implementation of this project will require considerable efforts and close cooperation between all actors involved. National governments, relevant institutions, private sector, civil society, and academia. I am confident that our common work and our firm commitment will allow us to get significant results, as well as sustainable results, in promoting and protecting intellectual property rights in Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine. In conclusion, I would like to express my gratitude to my colleagues from Georgia, Ukraine, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, and Romania for their participation in the conference dedicated to launching the EU project in Chișinău. I would also like to thank the whole team involved in the project, as well as all those who contributed to organization of this conference. I hope that today's meeting will become a starting point for our future cooperation and for the achievement of our joint objectives. Thank you very much for your attention. Now, I would like to thank all speakers for their wonderful words, for the wishes, for the encouragement. And I would like to invite to the floor the project leader, Mr. Bun Corbazabal, who is also part of the institutional team of EU4IP, to speak to us more about the project.
Director General, honorable members of the government of the Republic of Moldova, and distinguished participants. I am thrilled to be back to Moldova for the inauguration conference of the EU4IP project and to see some already familiar faces in the audience. Let me take some minutes to present and introduce you to the details of the project. The pointer was working before. I'm sorry. To give a bit of context and background about the project, the EU4IP supports the European Commission for the implementation of a set of policy priorities under EU external actions in the field of intellectual property. That involves, of course, neighborhood and enlargement policies, such as those affecting, of course, the EU4IP project, but also on trade-related matters, for instance, such as the association agreement and the DCFTA that was signed with Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, but also others such as the implementation of the EU4IP action plan and the lack of global fair play that is affected by businesses operating worldwide. And we do so with what we call the EU-IPN, the European Union Intellectual Property Network, which is a network expertise composed by European national IP offices and user associations, some of them also present here today. And we do so not only with candidate countries, but we do it in many different locations, actually. The EUIPO is supporting these policies with 9 different EU-funded projects from Latin America to Caribbean countries, in Africa, Southeast Asia, China, and more recently, since just a few weeks ago, also with the Republic of Korea, and of course with Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova, and with Georgia for the second time. In this picture, actually, you see also the figures about the portfolio of the current projects that we are implementing. So when we talk about the EU4IP, we talk about 4 years project, 4 million euros until December 2027. And it's also good to note that the EUIPO is actually co-funding on average 30% of all these projects. When we talk about the EU4IP and the rationale, of course, there are many facts and many good cooperation factors that has been already highlighted, such as the bilateral technical cooperation that exists for years already with Ukrainian, Georgian, and Moldovan counterparts. But with the newest scenario for EU candidate status of Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, we will be supporting a specific IP chapter of the EU ATKIS, the chapter number 7, and we will follow, of course, the guidance by the Commission reports that are issued annually. We will facilitate a specific IP reforms based on what we call a demand-driven approach, and based, of course, on the specific national needs of each of the different countries. Areas of support, as you can imagine, we are talking a multi-country, multi-stakeholder, and affecting different economic areas. So, of course, there are many of them, but here I would like to emphasize the main message is that this program will be covering all type of intellectual property matters, meaning trademarks, designs, copyrights, patents, geographical indications, plant varieties, and, of course, enforcement matters, as it was previously highlighted. Let's now have a look at the overall objective. When we look at the long-term perspective of the project, of course, the idea will be to develop a culture for innovation-driven economies. And to do so, of course, it is important to promote values such as competition, such as creativeness, and support the business community, and ultimately, of course, attracting investment to these countries. But when we look into a more mid-term perspective and the specific objective of the project, of course, again, we will focus very much on the Chapter 7 of the EU ATKIS and the guidance and the suggestions also issued by the European Commission. But let's now have a look a bit more in detail about the expected results and the 4 main components of the project. The very first one, it's about enhancing the legal framework. Of course, this is key. This is one of the main components of the project because it will relate about all the project related to EU ATKIS communautaire. And of course, for that, a lot of studies and legal comparative analysis will be carried out to identify gaps in the IP legal framework so that we will be able to draft law amendments to ensure there is a full alignment of the candidate countries with the provisions and obligations of the Chapter 7. Component number 2 is not only important to have a good legal framework, but it's also very important to implement it rightly. As it was specifically mentioned before, here we will be looking at the IP practice and aligning examination and registration practices to ensure predictability and legal certainty for the IP users. For that, there are specific type of activities such as development of examination guidelines or the adoption of specific IT tools for examiners or for users, which are very helpful for the system. Ultimately, in this component, the very main objective is, of course, to support the 3 IP offices, so AGEPI, SAC Patenti, and UNEPO, to perform better in any area of their interest, based, of course, on specific demands. And that could be an issues related to quality, learning, and so on. The third component, of course, it's important to engage and to communicate with the business community and with the private sector. A lot of awareness activities will be carried out, such as this event taking place today. And of course, competitions for creators, for designers. We will be as well promoting IP diagnosis services for SMEs, as well as supporting the development of the collective right management system that was also highlighted by the Commission, or geographical indications as one of the areas where we believe there is room for supporting private sector and the business community. Last component, of course, has to be on enforcement matters. We will be promoting networking activities on IP between the law enforcement authorities, but also capacity building and targeted trainings to other officials such as customs or prosecutors, facilitating access to compilation of specific European case law for judges to ensure that the decisions taken are aligned with those of the European system, or eventually developing administrative, border, or criminal enforcement guidelines for law enforcement authorities. Additionally, studies and data collection, it was mentioned as well by our executive director, the observatory, the methodologies on the impact that counterfeiting is having for the European system. These methodologies have a long and successful track record. Those are as well at the disposal of the 3 countries to develop specific studies within the project. As you see, there is a lot that has to be done. We're still in the inception phase of the project, so there are still a number of activities that are taking place during this first 6 months. The main deliverable or the main outcome out of these 6 months will be the first working plan of the project. That will be based, of course, on the stakeholders consultation that is currently taking place in the 3 countries and in close cooperation with the European Commission. This working plan will be endorsed by the project steering committee, the governing bodies of the project, where basically we will see there are representatives, of course, the 3 IP offices, SAC Patenti, AGEPI, and UNEPO, and many, I would say, more than our previous experiences from different projects, many DGs involved and interested to participate and to be engaging in this project from the European Commission. So it's DG NEAR, but also Trade, GROW, and many other colleagues. Luckily, I will not be alone. So there is a full team that will be dedicated for the implementation of the project. We are in the process of building this team, but here the main message as well will be that there will be an IP expert. There's a procurement that will be launched soon for the Republic of Moldova, and there will be an IP expert dedicated to support all the activities of the project at the premises of AGEPI. Awareness, visibility, of course, it is key to promote the activities. I invite you, of course, to follow the social media accounts and to check from time to time the project website that we are building. It's already up and running. Of course, the contents are a bit limited so far, but there will be updates on a regular basis as soon as the milestones and achievements are being executed. And then maybe just to conclude on a more personal note, I would like just to emphasize and reiterate that I'm very honored to undertake this role and to coordinate all the efforts on behalf of the EU IPO. I realize that this is an important project, that the ambitions are very high, and it's of course very good, and you can count on my full commitment and dedication to make it a successful project. Thank you.
Mulțumesc frumos pentru prezentare.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Now it's time for a special moment for connection, networking, and exchange of ideas with a cup of coffee, of course. You will have a chance to ask project leader more detailed questions. We'll learn more about the EU4IP. Please, our guests of honor, please join the press area. The media representatives would like to have an opportunity to interview you, and also the representatives of the EU member states can join us, as well as representatives of Ukraine and Georgia. Journalists, please use the opportunity to ask relevant questions that would be meaningful to your audience. So thank you very much. And according to the agenda, please be back in 20 minutes at 15:05 Chișinău time. Thank you very much.